name's on. It says on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Great. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to our discussion. My name's Tammy Moscow. I'm the chair of today's panel. I currently work as Senior Family Counsel to the Superior Court of Justice, Office of the Chief Justice, and we've changed the mics, I think. Thank you. Great. I have been in government dealing exclusively with family law for 10 years. And prior to that, I was a private family lawyer at a law firm called Tork and Mains. So I've seen this from a few different angles. I also happen to be an accredited family mediator through OAFM as well, the Ontario Association for Family Mediation. I have a great panel assembled for you here, and it's a mishmash in a really good way. So I've got public, I've got private, I've got my token male on the panel. I've got people who I work closely with and others who are newer friends, but different perspectives, which I think will be helpful. So I'm going to introduce the participants first, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about our format for today's discussion. We are keeping it casual, so grab drinks, grab food. There are cue cards where you can write down questions if you want. Chloe will be circulating. And there's also a roaming mic, which will come by as well. So we're happy to be interrupted at any point. So right dead in the middle is Carol Barkwell. She's the executive director of Luke's Place. Luke's Place is a legal clinic in the Durham area for women who have experienced domestic violence. Thanks, Carol. Brian, you can probably tell who Brian is, family lawyer at Epstein Cole, also the incoming president of AFCC Ontario. For those of you who don't know it, AFCC is this great organization, multidisciplinary, the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts, an international organization that many of us are members of, where people from different constituent professions get together and learn and develop best practices. Julie Matthews, on my far right, is the executive director of CLEO, Community Legal Education Ontario. And you'll hear we've done work on a number of different exciting programs together. And then last but certainly not least is Julia Vera. Julia is a family lawyer as well, but she is the current chair of the Family Lawyers Association. Also involved in legal aid and OCL and all sorts of other stuff. So I think you'll appreciate the different perspectives. So I just want to take a few minutes to set the stage. Some of this will be common knowledge to many, if not all of you, but I think it helps you to see where we've come from in terms of different participants in the system trying to develop real concrete improvements, many of which have really taken shape in the last year or so. So when I approached speakers, I said, I'm not making this easy for you. I don't want a PowerPoint. I don't want you to just talk for 10 minutes and then pass the mic. But I want you to tell me concretely what you've done that the public will see as a meaningful step forward. So none of internal, we all work on a daily basis on our own organization's priorities. We all do lots of work internally. For instance, I help develop new resources for judges, but we're not talking about any of that. This is public-facing, concrete improvements that I hope that you'll see as some examples of real meaningful steps forward since first the National Action Committee's work, but also since the Family Legal Services Review of now a couple years ago, which has informed some of our work as well. So hopefully it won't surprise you, but family law is the area that people are most likely to be impacted in or touched by directly. And this is it was documented in, I think, the Middle Income Ontarians Access to Justice report, but it's not a surprise to those of us who work in the system. The reality is very clear. We have very high percentages of self-represented litigants in family cases, and there's no indication that that's changing anytime soon. The numbers are a little bit all over the place. 50% is probably seen as a conservative estimate, and 80% is one of the higher estimates. Having worked at the ministry, I can tell you that the information is not necessarily collected in a consistent and systematic way. So it's hard to pinpoint the actual number, but we know it's a high number where at least one of the parties in a family case doesn't have counsel. We understand from research from Rachel Birnbaum and others that cost is a significant factor in why people end up not having counsel, but not the only one. So things like do-it-yourself attitudes and perceptions about the value of lawyers also contribute to the reality that we face. Also should come as no surprise that this causes real challenges for both the litigants and the court system and other participants like family lawyers if they're on the other side. But I'm going to save any detailed examination of that for another day. So, as I mentioned earlier, our goal today is to highlight a few concrete examples of how the family law bar and family justice organizations have taken real concrete steps forward to address some of the challenges that we face. And before getting into the details about the programs, which we're going to talk about very shortly, I wanted to talk about some of the common principles that I think are increasingly being held amongst the family law bar, and I think aren't either well known or necessarily well recognized in the access to justice discussions. So having worked with family lawyers directly and indirectly for many years, I can tell you that overall they are a very, very committed group. They're committed to access to justice. There's a reason why they're doing this law and not tax law. Brian can tell you that specifically. I'll tell you, business lawyers get paid a lot easier. They don't deal with clients crying. They don't deal with urgent phone calls in the middle of the night. Many, if not all of us, have gone into this work because we want to make a difference and we want to help people. I think lawyers often get blamed for some systemic challenges, and I think it helps us to give people the benefit of the doubt and start from the premise that we're all doing our best in the roles that we have. So that's my little pitch there. The other thing is that, like the Law Commission report told us a good 5 or 6 years ago, we can't keep building innovations based exclusively on volunteer hours. So unlike many other areas of law, family lawyers already do a lot, either on a pro bono or on a reduced fee basis. So people think of family lawyers and they think of, one specific partner at Brian's firm who charges out at, I don't know, $800 an hour. But the reality is that most family lawyers are doing a significant portion of their work as sometimes agents for the Office of the Children's Lawyer or the Family Responsibility Office. Sometimes it's legal aid certificate work, although maybe there's perhaps not as much of that as we might want. They volunteer to do mandatory information programs for which they receive no compensation. The senior members of the bar act as dispute resolution officers, for which they receive a whopping $250 for a full day's work. So there's lots that they're doing. There are pro bono appeal programs. And I just want to caution us against saying, you're the problem and therefore you have to do more without remuneration, because of course this is a business and people have to pay their overhead and pay their staff. And also hopefully making enough of a living out of it that they stay doing this work that we need. We also know that even the clients that retain us on a full retainer basis are, for the most part, limited in the funds that they have available. So having run my own practice and brought a lot of my own clients in even 10 years ago as a younger family lawyer, we look for cost-efficient ways, and there are many good lawyers out there that are looking to stretch the client's dollars as far as they can. I think that we now have innovative models available or developing that are going to help us do that. But if you give a bill to a client and they can't pay and they can't afford your services, no one's ahead at the end of the game. So again, just from my experience, I think that family lawyers are trained in that reality about how to be as affordable as possible as they can for their clients. We also acknowledge, and this again is not a huge surprise, but there's a huge unmet need for self-represented litigants to have access to affordable legal services based on their needs, their capability, and their particular circumstances. And I think you'll see that some of the stuff that's actually happening is starting to respond to that. So the format that we've decided to follow is that I have 4 questions here for discussion, and I want to ask them one at a time and then get the presenters' views on them and start generating a dialogue, because I think that will be more interesting than each of us just going through our specific things. So maybe I'll kick off and I'll start with Julie, and I'll ask what the specific need or challenge is that you've tried to address with the project that you're going to be profiling. Microphone.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll be talking about 2 CLIO initiatives. I was supposed to pick one, but they're kind of one combined, Steps to Justice, which now includes some online fillable forms. And I'll tell you more about those later. But the gaps we were trying to address, and there are many, but CLIO produces clear language information to help people understand and exercise their legal rights. And as you all know, people are increasingly going online for help. And so one of the gaps is the fact that people are now overwhelmed with the abundance of information they can find to help them with their problems. And it's very difficult for them to sort through the information and figure out what to rely on. So that was one thing we were trying to address, was sort of trying to convey a brand of reliability to end users. A second expectation, I think, that comes in the online age is an expectation of users that they are going to get customized, specific information that responds to their problem. They want an answer, they want a calculation, they want an app, they want that kind of information. They don't want explanatory materials. And then more substantively, people are expecting to get, as Tammy said, with the number of people who are representing themselves in court on their own, but as well as people at all stages with the family law problem, they need help. And I think it's a gap that we're increasingly addressing, but hasn't been addressed fully. I don't know if we're addressing it fully, but hasn't been addressed as well until recently with our initiatives. They want help understanding what's a pretty complicated family law process. They need help filling out the forms that are not necessarily easy for them to fill out. They need help understanding how to actually advocate for themselves in court. So that was another gap we were trying to address. And finally, people frequently need help finding affordable legal services in their area that can help them with problems. So, I mean, people know about the lawyer referral service, which is helpful, but we really were aware of people's efforts and often sort of frustrations in finding good help that they can access. So that was the last gap sort of that we were trying to address.
So let's pass over to Brian, because I think you can pick up nicely on that point.
So, thanks. The CLIO forms and website is just fantastic, actually, in my view. I spent some time on it, and it is a very clear and very accurate, from a legal perspective, map of what to do at various points. So I think it's amazing. Where my piece comes in, it's called the Ontario Family Law, make sure I get it right, Limited Scope Services Project. Let me take about 3 minutes and just tell you what it's about. So I could talk for 3 hours about it. It's fascinating. What it is, it's a pilot project, and in true sense of a pilot project, the idea is to get it up and running and then have it taken over by the family law bar and the supporting organizations, which I'll talk about in a second. But to do that, we needed funding, and the Law Foundation of Ontario very generously gave a very significant grant to help us work on this project. The steering committee members work on it for free, but we have an admin person who is of great assistance, and I'll tell you about it in a minute, are building the website, and the website is a critical piece. Let me step back and tell you where it is. Give me a time warning if I go too long. What we're trying to do is
gong, Brian.
gong
Do
show.
it discreetly.
We're trying to meet the unmet need that people have for legal services, but who can't afford full legal representation for an entire case. That can be incredibly cost prohibitive, and frankly, absolutely out of reach for most middle-income people unless they do things like sell their house and give half the house proceeds to the lawyers, etc., or perhaps not half, but some very significant amount. That's the case, notwithstanding that the family law rules and the family judges do their very best to get these cases resolved quickly and, in a perfect world, consensually. In my view, actually, the entire family law system in Ontario, justice system, is designed to get people to settle at every step. So that's not, but justice also requires procedural fairness and other steps. So you can't just, it's not like American TV where cases are resolved, you know, glung glung, and the case gets resolved because the lawyers start talking after they meet their client the first time. It doesn't work that way. So what Unbundled is instead of providing a full retainer for the client where you deal with the whole case, the client, to a greater or lesser degree, is in charge of the case, but the lawyer delivers a la carte legal services or this and that. And maybe I'll actually in a minute talk, my next round, talk more about what it looks like, but there's a whole bunch of permutations and combinations of what that can look like. But it effectively allows people to access legal services as and when they need them, to get the data, to get the coaching, to get the drafting, to get the person to argue that piece or whatever it is, and then get out. You can manage the costs, you can manage a whole bunch of things, and again, that value add is very significant because, again, as much as the family justice system is designed to be as simple as possible, and Cleo helps, and the judges certainly help, there's still a fair bit of complexity in the law, as there has to be, frankly, for it to be fair, because if the law wasn't complex, it actually couldn't be that fair, because it has to take into account all the circumstances. So,
Okay, Brian, shall I cut you off shortly?
yes, 30 more seconds. So two things, and I'll get a chance to come around and do more. What we have is we're going to have a roster of lawyers who are trained to do this work, and this website, and we train the lawyers and put out best practices for them and help them with the retainers and everything. That's on the lawyer side. On the public side, which is what really matters, this is a way for the public to find lawyers who do this work. You don't have to. I've been doing unbundled stuff for years. I didn't even call it that at the beginning, et cetera. But the roster will then be able to connect people who do this work, and we've had incredible support from various organizations, from the two levels of courts, 30 seconds, two levels of courts, Superior Court of Justice, Ontario Court of Justice. We're working with the Law Society, we're working with the Legal Insurer Law Pro, the Ontario Bar Association, AFCC, the Advocate Society, Family Lawyers Association, et cetera. So it's what Tammy said, it's a real push that I'll talk about more when I get my next time, to implement what you're saying, which is lawyers being able to care and being able to help as many people as possible as their means permit.
Okay, Carol, take the mic away from Brian.
Are we going? Yeah. So when women leave abusive relationships, they are faced with complex challenges that can impact their access to safe and just legal outcomes. We know that abuse doesn't end at separation. In fact, the Ontario Coroner's Domestic Violence Death Review Committee reports continue to identify that the risk for survivors of intimate partner violence escalates during pending or recent separation. This is when women seek support from us to begin their family law process. Many of these women will not qualify for legal aid, nor will they be able to afford to hire a lawyer. Luke's Place offers a wraparound approach to services for women in Durham Region. While accessing our legal support worker program, women who are unrepresented can receive family law assistance through our pro bono summary legal advice clinic. Through the Ministry of the Attorney General funded Family Court Support Worker Program, Luke's Place coordinates and delivers in-person and online training, mentoring, and resources to more than 85 workers across the province. The Family Court Support Worker Program was designed in part after our service delivery model, and it's through this work and through our years of developing resources and delivering training across the province that we became keenly aware of the many barriers to justice for women who are subjected to abuse, especially those living in rural and remote communities. Women in small communities are faced with the reality that there are limited numbers of lawyers and likely few that will have specialized training on how to effectively represent an abuse survivor. In many cases, women rely on legal aid certificates for representation. As we know, this further reduces her options to a small roster of lawyers on the legal aid list who often struggle to manage the high volumes of service requests from the community. Court-related services, such as the family court support workers, duty counsel, and the FLIC, have very limited hours and locations in low population areas. Travel to anything, a lawyer, the FLIC, or the FCSW, takes time. Public transit is almost non-existent. Additionally, abusive partners often conflict out all lawyers in these smaller communities so that their ex-partner has no access to legal representation or even advice.
Great. Julia.
So it's true there's a lot of good information out there, but we felt that much of that information was either online or in like a document format. So we thought we try to fill the gap in terms of providing this family law information in an in-person setting. And our sessions are not contingent on the person's income or their personal circumstances. So we partner with the Toronto Library, and we're providing these family law information sessions across Toronto. And so anyone with any type of circumstances can just walk in to any one of our information sessions. And I guess later on I'll discuss a little bit more about what the sessions entail.
So do you want to just continue on with our second question? Because we've touched on it, and maybe the order wasn't great in terms of them. But the second question that I wanted to pose is, what is your specific improvement, and why is it so innovative?
Okay.
So you can just lead in there.
All right. So like I said, we felt there was a need to provide this information in person. So our sessions are run for an hour. And then there's a half an hour question period. Our members don't provide legal advice, but they do provide extensive family law information. So what we do is we pair our members, and they provide these sessions, and the information that's provided has already been set up by our organization. So that makes things a lot easier for the bar to buy in, because then they don't need to invest much time other than the hour and a half that they have to actually be present and present at the session. And it also ensures that the information that's being provided is consistent. It started off as something that we thought maybe we would run maybe twice a year, but we're thinking, given the input that we're hearing, because it's actually running during this week, that we're going to do it for a few times a year, just because it's been so popular. We've actually heard from the Toronto Libraries that it's one of their most well-attended programs, and that was their words, not mine.
Sushi making classes?
Yeah, probably. We're just hoping that in that way people are provided with something in person, because although the information that's out there is very good, I think there's nothing like being able to hear somebody speak, and after you've processed the information, be able to have an opportunity to ask questions.
Sorry, I'm just going to borrow the mic. I just wanted to clarify that the sessions are free. There's no
Yes.
cost for litigants?
No, they're
That's great. Okay, so Carol, maybe we'll pass back that way. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the specific initiative and why it's innovative?
Sure.
So our access to justice improvement at Luke's Place is the virtual legal clinic. So it's based on, and like our pro bono summary advice clinic model in Durham Region, it's funded by the Law Foundation of Ontario. The virtual legal clinic uses video conferencing software to connect women in rural and remote communities to family law lawyers who are located all across the province. Women seeking support from the clinic are connected through one of our 22 service partners. Their support worker connects with us to arrange the appointment, while also supporting women to prepare, and provides the safe and confidential space for her on the day of the appointment. The worker attends this appointment with the woman to assist with note-taking and emotional support. They are also available to clarify action items and support her to follow through on the legal advice provided during the clinic. During clinic appointments, lawyers can answer general legal questions and help develop a legal strategy. They can support with understanding legal terms and provide information about the family law process and how to complete court documents. Lawyers are also available to provide general information to the workers who are seeking guidance to better support their clients. At the end of the meeting, the women and the lawyer sign agreements that acknowledge the professional relationship has ended. To conduct these consultations, we use GoToMeeting, a video conferencing software that's pretty secure. And prior to initiating this, we researched the security and accessibility of a number of software options. On occasion, there can be internet connection issues that impact the video conference quality, and in these situations, or where women feel more comfortable and safe, they may choose to engage by using the phone. Local service providers are key to this Access to Justice initiative because they provide women with the continuity that unbundled legal services can lack. They also bring expertise in supporting abuse survivors, many of whom are impacted by trauma, which lawyers involved very much appreciate. Luke's Place provides in-person training to the service providers so that they are better able to identify family law issues and prepare women for the meeting in advance with the lawyers. We also offer an online course, extensive resources, and ongoing support via our training website. The lawyers providing pro bono services through the virtual legal clinic complete our CPD accredited online training, also developed with funding from Law Foundation. It's called Effective Lawyering with Clients Leaving Abusive Relationships. They have access to our legal director, Pamela Cross, for mentoring and support. So to date, the 22 organizations that have partnered with us include shelters, women's centers, counseling programs, and victim services. They are located in northeastern and northwestern Ontario and in the rural eastern area of the province. And hopefully we'll be expanding soon to other underserved communities in the new year. All participants, lawyers, women, service providers, complete evaluation surveys after each consultation. So the women who have participated in the consultations have reported that the lawyers are very helpful. They have a much better understanding about what to do next in their cases. The service is also recognized for its convenience when travel can be so time-consuming and expensive. The service providers tell us that the impact of working with lawyers who understand domestic violence and the legal advice, they can see it in the legal advice that's provided to the women. Many say that they have learned a lot from the lawyers, particularly around language to use in court and in documents. And workers also tell us about the positive impact when women can see the lawyer through the video conference. It builds trust and connection. So many service providers have told us that this is life-changing for them because that they can meet with clients located in one of their agency's satellite offices, and unlike here where we may be half an hour to a satellite office, they can be 3 hours away. And this, of course, means more time for direct service for more women. The lawyers, all of whom specialize in family law and are typically based in the GTA, also tell us they really enjoy their involvement in the legal clinic. And they report learning a great deal about the legal issues abuse survivors manage, how intimate partner impacts family violence cases, and the realities of the lack of access to justice in the rural and remote communities we serve.
Great. I hope you guys are getting as excited as I was building the panel. Brian, do you want to pick up on where you left off with the unbundled roster?
Be delighted. Is this working? So what's the name of the Boncallo? What's the real name of the Boncallo
Family
report?
Legal Services Review.
So the Family Legal Services Review, which I always call the Boncallo report. Let's start there for a sec. Justice Boncallo released this a year and a half or 2 years ago, and she did a detailed analysis of the access to justice situation in family law in Ontario. So this is I've already mentioned all the organizations that did it. I failed to mention two people, Professor Rachel Birnbaum of Western University School of Social Work and Professor Nick Balla. They are the two investigators who are actually doing research and relating to this as well. So it's underpinned by true, like, I've never seen such a constellation of people, even though the organization I'm with is interdisciplinary. This is a perfect example of how you get an actual project to be that interdisciplinary. It's an institutional disciplinary. It's kind of unbelievable. So this is the legal response, broad-based, probably lawyer-driven, I think would be the right way to say it in terms of its when the pedal hits the metal, of actually how can we provide services on a cost-effective basis. So what does it look like? Okay, so one point, you have to, and it's not up yet so you can't see it, but I have access to the beta or whatever they call it website, one step away from launch. It is actually incredible. It is very user-friendly, so the public will have access and lawyers will have access. It's a trove of information, a treasure trove of information of everything that I could talk about here is in there in such detail about what to do that it helps both ends of the deal. It helps the clients and it also helps the lawyers because there's the two pieces that have to come together. So then, okay, so all this is just talk, but the website's beautiful. So what does it look like? What do these unbundled services look like? So sometimes they're called limited scope retainer services as well. Here's what they can look like. And I think it's fair to say they started out with a lawyer drafting, and this is some years ago, I'll draft something for you. I'll draft your...
Ghostwriting, we used to call it.
Ghostwriting, yeah. That's right. So, and I still do this. I draft court documents for clients. I'll look at their emails from time to time. I'll make settlement offers for them or have them do the first draft and review. And it's now far more than that, though. So it could be that for a specific court attendance, you are there, and you don't go on the record, though, meaning your name is not appearing on the court documents such that documents are served on you and everything else. It's limited in that sense. And one thing I have to mention, too, is the judges, who I would say 7 years ago, I can picture conferences talking to judges about this. Some judges were reticent for this type of work because it does cause them some complication. Is the lawyer on or off? How much authority does the lawyer have to deal with the case? However, what I've seen is, I would say the vast majority of judges, and I spend a long time talking to judges and various things that I do, are very much on side with this and are open to its various dimensions. And I think the reason is simple. It's because, frankly, there are so many self-represented litigants in court that they would like, as Justice Boncalo pointed out, whatever degree of good help can be provided would help everybody involved, not simply the court, but also litigants, everybody, and help get cases resolved, and which really helps the families, right? Because this is really about families, and apart from fees and everything else, and cases, it's a family that's torn and broken up no matter where you're at. So especially if there's children, it's horrible. You need to get it resolved as quickly as possible and as well as possible. So what other kind of services, though? So one thing I do a lot of is what could be construed as coaching, called coaching. In fact, called that. Again, I just did it in the past and didn't call it anything. But the name resonates with you think of what I do. So people will call me who've retained me and say, okay, I've got a settlement conference coming up. I'm thinking of resolving this case. How do I go about negotiating the deal with the others? First of all, they might say, can you help me draft the brief or take a look? And if we contract for that, I'll say, of course we will. But then how do I, and this is where the coaching piece comes in, how do I negotiate this deal? How am I going to look at this? Say it's a parenting issue and a child support issue. What's the best way to do it? Now, all I do basically all day long other than speak at stuff like this is negotiate. I'm sort of negotiating 10 or 20 different things a day because that's frankly what most family lawyers do. Sometimes I'm in court, but very often I'm out of court negotiating. So I happen to know a lot about negotiating, and in terms of the practice of it, but also in terms of the substance. So I can actually say to them, here's all the dimensions you need to think about. Here's where your bottom line, you should be thinking about your bottom line being here. Here's the risk if they do this, what could turn on this side, et cetera. And what happens is, and you can't actually get this by reading the cases. It's simply not possible. You can get a lot of it, but you can't. This comes with however many years experience that. It's not just me. Family lawyers have. So by then, many of them have said. I'll just tell you what they've said. They said, they usually don't say it right away. They actually say, "That's great, sounds good, great." And then I ask them. I say, "Please tell me how it goes." I have somebody who today is in court actually, and who will tell me how it went. And I spent, I don't know, however much time, 45 minutes yesterday coaching on doing this, and if this happens and this. And, she's reported in the past, that was fantastic. Here's what happened. The judge in that case knows that I'm in the background somehow. That's not a requirement, but, I don't try to hide it. And I've had other cases where people have said at a case conference, which is an event in a family law proceeding, okay, this has happened, the judge said this, and we're standing down for a recess. What do you think? And what I'll often say to them is, and I can't do it all the time, I'm available by phone. So if you need me, I'll be there because it's your day, it's important. So, I'll do that. In that case that I'm thinking of, the other side was represented, and he was trying to basically communicate the message, and I said, why don't you just let me talk to the other lawyer? So, and the other lawyer was happy to do that and happy to actually have something, and we were able to work out something on consent and move the matter forward. The case, I can tell you happily, is now one step later with a major blow up that also got fixed by, it's not just because it's me, but both lawyers, her side, the wife's side, and the husband's side, working together and putting it together. I think the guy probably spent, in legal fees, he probably spent, I won't tell you the number, but it doesn't matter. It's about probably 4 to 5 hours of time versus if I had done all those events, because he was in court in this one court and they got held up. He was in court that day for 7 hours, and I was able to come in sort of coach him in advance, spend 20 minutes during the event, and it was therefore done at a fraction of the cost, and he couldn't afford it. He's a guy who works in the restaurant industry, and there's no way, even what he's paying for those 5 hours is more than he wants. And I understand. I'm the kind of person who I'll walk outside my building with a cup of coffee and a coffee mug from my office because I value money, and it's better to spend it on your family and kids. So
Okay, Brian.
So there we go. So my next round.
I know who my lengthy speaker is. Not that it's not interesting. So in full disclosure, I'm actually the chair of the roster that Brian's been speaking to, but because he's a practicing family lawyer, I really wanted him to speak to it. The one thing that you'll understand when you see the project, which we hope to launch in January, is we wanted to make it easy for clients to find the lawyers in their community who will provide services in this way. So Brian's not the only one who does this. Joel Miller's in the room. He's been a leader in the field as well. There are many lawyers who have been doing it, some full-time and some on a more ad hoc basis. But for the most part, it's quite difficult for clients to find the lawyers in their communities who will do it. And of course, we are looking to increase the supply and the quality as well. So what you'll see when the website is launched is a page for each lawyer who signs up. And the training, there is some mandatory training and some low level of experience because we wanted to encourage the younger members of the bar to do it. But you'll be able to go to, let's say, Julia's page, and Julia's page will say, I serve the following communities, I speak the following languages, and from this menu of unbundled services, these are the kind of services that I provide. So if you are in a mediation and looking for a lawyer who will provide independent legal advice on your mediation memorandum of understanding, you'll find the 4 lawyers in Barrie who will do precisely what you're looking for. So we're trying to make it really easy for litigants and clients who aren't involved in the court system to find the specific piece of representation and assistance that they're looking for. So get rid of the mystery, get rid of the Googling, get rid of going to someone because they did full representation for your friend, because I think we're seeing that people are shell-shocked about even going to a lawyer's office. So if they can find out from going through this program that Julia or Joel will do the specific services that they are looking for in their community, then they're 80% there. And as Brian said, there are many clients who have some resources available to them, but they want to be in control of how far they go and what they get for them. So the goal, the outward-facing goal of the project is to make it easier for clients to find lawyers who have had some training in the area and are ready, willing, and able to provide the specific services that they are looking for. So Julie, do you want to finish us off on this question?
So I'll talk about what we actually have done, Steps to Justice. So 3 or 4 years ago, we got it underway with the active assistance of the Action Group on Access to Justice, which enabled us to connect with a lot of justice sector partners that CLEO hasn't historically worked with. And it was funded from its early days by the Law Foundation, and now that has been supplemented by Legal Aid Ontario and DOJ funding, but we always need more, so if anyone has ideas, keep it in mind.
And the ministry, too.
And the ministry for the forms, yeah. So we produce process-oriented information that helps people take steps to deal with their legal problems, not just in family law, but I think we covered 10 areas of law. There's extensive information sort of presented from a user's point of view, question, answer, 3 to 5 next steps, a little section of you may needs, which is links to checklists and forms and all that type of thing, and then a quite robust getting legal help section and getting legal and community services help. So we're just partnering with 211 to add a more robust connecting with community services. I'm so glad to hear about this work on legal services. We try hard, as I said earlier, to make sure that people are not left hanging when they get the information, and we give them the best we can in terms of where to go for help and legal help. But it's a challenge for us to present that in an easy to way use. So this is wonderful. It's been a challenge. It's been, given the amount of content, sort of just keeping it. Oh, that was supposed to be a later question, but anyway, keeping the information accurate. And the huge body of information. It's both that we have launched recently. Well, actually, the official launch is next month, Justice Paws a Paw. And if we thought the English, managing that body of content was difficult, well, let me tell you something, the French is even more difficult for us because we're primarily an English organization, but not any longer. So the information is designed to be flexible for people with different needs and different capabilities and at different stages in their legal problems. So we really did try and address that. And it's, as I said, it's very focused on process-oriented information that goes to the earlier point that that's a big gap in terms of what people need. As an aside, as part of the Steps to Justice content, we produced an online interactive flow chart that takes people through the family court process, and that has been sort of one of our most high demand resources. One of the main authors, lawyers working on that is in the room. So it was quite an undertaking as well. The site includes a live chat function, and it's not live chat to get legal advice as much as that's what really people need. We only help them find what they need on the site and get good referrals despite that limited but helpful service. Despite the fact that it's limited, I think we get 200 live chats per day with users in the 2-hour period, and then a whole bunch of people write us and say, you're only available from 11 to 1, and then they email us their question outside of that time frame. So we'd love to do more on live chat, and how are we going to do the French live chat? Anyway, there's lots of questions we have.
That's the next question, Julie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay, okay, but I was supposed to talk about why it's innovative.
Yeah.
I have a really broad definition of innovative. But anyway, to me was innovative is it was truly collaborative. It was a collaborative justice sector initiative. So many of us got together, and the court stepped up early on, both levels of court, and the Law Society and legal clinics and a whole bunch of others. And we have, I think, 70 organizations involved in it. The OBA's been involved. And in family law alone, we have 5 family law content committees that are composed of a range of people with expertise in that area. So that's been fabulous. I haven't seen anything like it before in my experience with the justice system, us coming together. And the idea is we don't need to all be presenting the same information, developing the same information. We might have to give a little bit on how we'd say it, and lawyers, that's hard for them to do. But in fact, if we came up with some really good, accurate, easy to understand information that we can all use, wouldn't that be great? So another innovation is we offer an embed feature. That means that other organizations can take part of the content, whatever they want to take, by as narrow or as broad as they'd like, and present it on their site as if it lives on their site. So the courts have done that. I think they're going to add the French soon. The Superior Court has. The Law Society has embedded the English content. I think about 40 community organizations have embedded it. So community organizations who can't typically produce their own information, they don't have the resources, they can do it through the embed. And the other innovative thing about that, and then I'll talk about because I didn't say a whole lot before. Okay, so then the other innovative thing is, as we said earlier, as Julia said earlier, CLEO doesn't think that online information is the only way to go, particularly given our audience, our primary target audience at CLEO of low-income and disadvantaged communities. We still do high-need print publications and core topics, but we also are really committed to training trusted intermediaries and community workers. And so that in that way, if we're reaching people, reaching community workers, training them on steps to justice so they can help people in their communities who may lack digital skills or digital literacy or access to the internet and computers, that can go a long way. So I think we trained something like 3,000 workers last year, both on steps to justice and on all of our work. And so that's our way. We did an online course for library staff across the province, an 8-week online course. So we're trying really to, I think we're far from wraparound legal services, although I think we're making a lot of headway. But CLEO's trying to work with others, because we can't do it alone, to at least have wraparound legal information and referral services the best we can. The second thing we're doing is part of Steps to Justice, so I'm stinking it in, but it's a big thing. We're developing guided pathways or interactive interviews to help people fill out their family court forms. So it's a new tool already available on Steps to Justice. It did not come about easily. You didn't ask me for lessons learned, so I won't speak to that. But you are guided through a logical series of plain stated questions, and you only see a question if it applies to your situation. If you need help understanding the implications of the question and of what answer you might give, legal information is embedded into the question, sort of. So you can click on a Learn More button. So after you've answered, given all your information once only, the tool magically puts all the information together and populates the several forms that you need in particular to move forward with particular transactions, simple divorce or joint divorce. There's going to be a multitude of guided pathways down the road, but the ones that are available now are for simple divorce and joint divorce, including corollary relief. Pretty soon to come, would be separation with children in the next few months is what we're working on. 50 discrete pathways to support 18 transactions. Oh, yeah, and we're coordinating with Ministry of Attorney General, who's the funder of this initiative, and we've been working with sort of a group of family law stakeholders, again, sort of collaboratively, to align our work with their program for online e-filing, so it will feed into their e-filing.
So
Okay.
I can say on behalf of the court that we are so happy that CLEO has taken on this immense piece of work. I was reminded when I had to renew passports for my whole family, being fairly educated, how confusing a form can be. And the woman or man sits there with a highlighter and then sends you to the back of the line if you put the comma in the wrong spot. And our forms are pretty complicated. So it benefits everyone. It benefits not only the litigant, but also it's huge for our judges to have forms that actually are completed in a way that is responsive to the question that's asked, right? Because if you don't have the information, then they don't know what the issues are, and it's hard to be productive at a court attendance. So we are so happy that the court forms piece has been added. Julie, as she mentioned, the court has been a partner on that.
Yeah, we couldn't do it like this. Is not just a Clio thing. I mean, it's a
And
group
it's
thing.
great. And Julie was at a program from the National Self-Represented Litigants Project 2 weeks ago, as was one of my colleagues. And we learned about ongoing pain points or pressure points for self-represented litigants. So because we work so collaboratively, I sent an email to Julie saying, we've got to flesh out our information on these three things and likely others. Let's pick that work back up. The other thing, those of you who aren't deeply enmeshed in this won't understand how amazing it is that the answers are now very concrete and very specific. So one of my jobs when I worked with the ministry was helping to respond to letters from self-reps about how to move forward in their case. And you're not allowed to give legal advice, even though I'm a lawyer, because I don't act for them. So, I used to have to refer to a publication that the ministry had called What You Should Know About Family Law around 30 times a day, because it was the best way to give people standard information about where to start to address their concern. And Legal Aid had similar publications, some of which were 20 years old, some of which were more current. They were all up on the website. So now, if someone Googles, when does my child support end in Ontario, they can get right away to the specific answer and then to next steps. And Julie keeps reminding me that not everyone is online and it's not the only answer, and I understand that. But every time I go to a session about millennials and how they operate and how they think the world is at their fingertips, and within 7 seconds they should have an answer to any question or complete any transaction that they want. So the bar has been moved forward so much by these two initiatives, and it's really amazing how we have a trusted entry point, I don't know, for lack of a better word, into family law legal information, process and substantive. And one of the things we did was we added property content right away, because most of the information came from Legal Aid, and Legal Aid doesn't provide coverage for property issues in family law. So right away we added content on pensions and the matrimonial home and some of the other very common property issues that people, just because you have property doesn't mean you have money, right? Like, we've all got mortgages and lines of credit, and often now in family law, you're fighting about the debt as much as you are fighting about the equity. Huge steps forward with those two initiatives. So maybe we should take a quick pause here and just open up to questions. I don't know where Chloe is. I haven't received any yet, but I don't want to be remiss. There were some opportunity for online questions as well. Okay, any live questions? Sure. Chloe over here. Just tell us quickly who you are.
Okay, my name is Vanessa Lamb. I have two questions, actually. For Julia, I'm just wondering how the bar presentations are different from the MIP presentations. And then my second question is for Brian or for Tammy, also kind of wondering how the Ontario Family Law Limited Scope Service, or whatever it's called, is different from the National Self-Represented Litigants Directory.
I guess with MIP, that's something that, thank you. That's something that's required. And so these informations, because they're available to the general public, often people find themselves in situations where they may not be at the litigation stage, but just need general information. And so, and because this is being advertised through the Toronto Public Libraries, we feel that it probably will reach out to a broader number of people. And like I said, not necessarily people who are already in the litigation process or even having entered it, but it's just sort of a way to be able to give people information at all stages. And one thing they found interesting, we really like your pamphlets, and we provide them at the session. So there's sort of a takeaway in paper form for people. Yeah.
That's good to hear.
Oh, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
And one of the things, this isn't quite responsive to yours, but you just heard that. So she uses hers. I get people to use yours. Your program's great too. I would absolutely send people to learn about IPV to your stuff. So the interesting thing too is these services aren't really exclusive. They can actually be all integrated together. And I would absolutely send people to your stuff. And if they were, for accessing you for IPV, there's no better resource. I know a lot about it, but there's no better resource to do that. So you can actually have the suite of services used and integrated and add true value. Again, but with cost savings too.
So Vanessa, nice to meet you. Vanessa's involved in another project connected to the roster, so we've spoken many times but haven't met in person. So your question is a good one. We are certainly aware of the NSLRP's roster. When the Justice Boncalo's review was coming forward, it was very clear to me that there was a greater role for unbundled. And being outside of the private family bar, I made an assessment that I was pretty confident that we would be more successful in moving the traditional bar forward if we got the support of each of their organizations. So I went right away to the leader or the chair or whoever the key person is at each of these organizations, and I said, here's what I'm doing, and I need you on board, and this is why. And also because of my position in the court, we actually speak with, her name is escaping me, Carrie Boyd from BC. Julie, you'll know. Is it Carrie Boyd? No. There was a similar project. Boyle, thank you. Boyle. There was a similar project in BC, and it has been kind of rolled into something else. And I said to her, what are the secrets of your success? And she said, court buy-in and bar buy-in. And I hadn't seen that be accomplished in the previous roster. And I know that that roster does have a number of people who are involved, and I think that's fantastic. But I thought, given my position, I was in a good position to, as Brian and Julie have said, bring people together. And being a family lawyer, I know that when people from Epstein-Cole stand up and say, this is a viable and appropriate way of practicing, the family bar believes them. And this is like the marriage contract issue of 20 years ago. People were so scared by LawPro. Like when I started working in this area, LawPro had caution tape, like yellow dead man caution tape on their unbundled page. What message does that say to family lawyers about how safe of a way this is to practice? So institutional support from the insurer and the court, but also bar leadership support, I saw as crucial to the success. And family lawyers are still doing marriage contracts, right? It's all about what's an appropriate level of risk for building your business. So that's where I tried to take a different approach. And we have, on the steering committee, we have a past chair of the family law section of FOLA, used to be CADELPA. We have Brian, who's connected to AFCC. We had Justice Sharon Shore, a recent appointment, who was the family law chair of the OBA. So that's what I'm hoping will really help us be successful. Right. And we've already done our first training in Barrie. We had 50 lawyers attend that training. On December 5th, there's a training at the OBA in Toronto, but will be available by webinar. I'm hoping we get a fantastic turnout for that too. So, when back at one of the tag sessions a couple years ago, Sheena might remember this, someone stood up and said, well, I'm not going to do unbundling. I don't want to do it. And my answer to them is fine. Like, we have a lot of lawyers in this province. I don't need to convince everyone to do it. But we need to make a measurable step forward, and that's what we're really trying to do. It's a really long answer.
Tammy, did I understand, you'll forgive me, but this is responsive to the question that was just asked. Did I understand you to say that this panel will have a separate page for each person?
Yes, there will be a directory page for each person with detailed information about what they're providing.
So the significant difference between what you're talking about and what the NSLRP has is they just have, if I understand that, it's just a list that people can voluntarily put their names towards whether or not they're really fully committed to unbundled services. But if you have a page where someone is supposed to outline what they actually do, yeah, it's closer to a form of vetting. It's not a real vetting, but it'll be closer to vetting, and I think it'll give people a better idea as to the abilities of the person whose name is on the roster. So this should be, if I understand what you have in mind, should be a more authoritative list.
Yeah, I mean, just to not oversell, we're not vetting. We wanted to have objective measures. And so, as I mentioned really quickly before, after a lot of discussion at the steering committee level, we agreed to a really low cutoff of experience of 3 years, partially because we think that the newer lawyers will be more open to more innovative ways of practicing. At 3 years and 30% of family law of experience. So we thought people should have an understanding of what a family law file is like before they get into this, because the communication issues need to be more closely managed. But in terms of transparency, I'll be able to go to your page, Joel, and it will say, I've taken 7 courses on coaching, right? Like, there's room for information for people to be able to decipher the level of experience they're seeking and the specific menu of services that people will provide. I think it's going to be great to people like OAFM, like the mediators, who are always looking for lawyers who will give advice on agreements. So yeah, anyways, so that's another thing. Yes,
Hi, my
Kathy.
name is Kathy Batiki. I practice law in Halton. I've been a presenter of the MIP since it was instituted, and I present mostly in the Milton Court. And I've always told everybody I could talk to that the MIP needs to be presented somehow before you start the court action. So I'm very interested in the library program. And my question would be, is there any way to connect with areas outside of the GTA, outside of Toronto, to get that program instituted, for example, in Halton, in Hamilton, and London, anywhere further out? The reason why I ask is because there may be a lot of lawyers and a lot of people outside of the Toronto area that just can't access the Toronto Public Library, but I would find that that program would be helpful in other areas.
This is our first year doing it, and it's been quite a success. And so definitely we would think of expanding out of the Toronto area. I know we like to believe that everything happens in Toronto or Toronto-centric, but definitely if there are other associations that want to work with us to expand out to the libraries outside of Toronto, it's something that we could. We're open to it, definitely.
Because I can speak about Halton and say that I'll contact you for Halton, and I guess that's a start.
Okay, perfect.
That's a
So
great
we can
idea.
talk
Yeah,
after.
No, it's fantastic.
All right, thanks.
Great. Okay, so I have a question from online. Justice Boncalo recommended to include paralegals in providing affordable family law services. Do you plan for any education for paralegals in family law? So there are people in this room who are better poised to speak to this issue than I am. For those of you who don't know, the Law Society is currently, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in the process of developing the initial license for paralegals in family law. Actually, 2 of our panelists have been very helpful in participating in the process to help create the content of that license. The Law Society then will be responsible for setting the educational requirements. That's not to say that once there is a license, there won't be a role for the OBA or the different organizations, but we are focusing on family law and family lawyer limited scope representation. That's the partners to this project, and that's the scope of the project.
And maybe I can just say just one other little thing, so I entirely agree with that, and I can say that the Law Society, and we have some people who are working on directing the project with us here today in the audience, has been very focused on that. And as Julia and I have spent, at least I've spent tens of hours, I think you've probably spent tens of hours on this as well, to really work this up. And we're getting to a position now, the Law Society is getting a position, doing a great job I believe they call it the focus group time. So there's a bunch of groups set. I'm going to be attending a bunch of them. I think Julie is attending a bunch of them with a lot of lawyers too, and part of their very comprehensive process. So it's well underway. But you're right, it's a Law Society object.
Right. Great. Priya is nodding. We did okay? Okay. Yeah. Thumbs up.
Oh, there you go.
And more questions? Yes. Is there a microphone? Yeah. Just because otherwise the webinar people won't hear.
Okay. Hello, thank you. My first question is, how many people in the audience are actually the public? Hands?
Thank you for coming.
And myself?
Yeah.
And my question for the panel is really in regard to what we can do for the abuse of the court by litigants who are represented, including their lawyers. I was fully represented for 5 years, then self-represented with unbundled services. Thank you so much, Cleo, and others. I'm a LexisNexis subscriber and now do this full-time. 7 years and counting, and still no full disclosure from the other party. And clear evidence of what, in my opinion, is perjury. When brought up in a settlement conference, I was just ignored. And so I do appreciate and value all the work you are continuing to do from a process point of view. However, the lack of accountability of both the represented or perhaps maybe the non-represented in the litigation process. And honestly, I did, after 40 some years in technology, and have seen some of the angles that the lawyers are going to when they know clearly there is at least $500,000 missing in the financial statement, 5 years and counting, going through a request for information, process, questioning, et cetera, and still no accountability.
So
Where do we go from here? And sadly, just let me add one more comment that is very frustrating. This particular opposing counsel also sits on the board of victim services. So abuse, yes, of spouses during the marriage is one thing. I have never had an argument that I can recall in 35 plus years with this darling husband of mine. Now it's all about every cent. And so he holds 90% of the assets, and therefore every day, every month, every year at 10 to 15% return on our investments, because he's claiming that I always earned more, but I just handed it over. So when we talk about access to justice, and I have great respect for Self-Represented Litigants Project by Professor McFarlane, and the reports that I have read every word of many, many times, including Cleo. In this last 7 years, perhaps I should have just spent my $50,000 to $100,000 from my RRSPs, going to law school. So I guess I'm delighted that I'm seeing progress. My work in the past is for fraud, anti-money laundering, and working with international communities to fix their processes and be accountable. I see, sadly, although a lot of good work, disturbingly slow progress from a process point of view. And access to justice, when I meet the self-represented folks and I have now moved 10 minutes from the court after my son graduated from McMaster in Hamilton, so that I can be there almost every day. And I am looking for your advice or someone's advice as to how we hold, first of all, contempt of the court's process. These types of counsel who give lawyers a bad name. And I have worked with unbundled services with fantastic lawyers, let me be clear. And so there needs to be some accountability of abuse of the court process. And I keep getting pushed back when I say, do I file a motion for contempt? Oh, well, the whole world ends.
So I'm obviously not going to have a satisfactory answer for you here, but no, appreciate your coming. And yeah, so I mean, this is not helpful to you, but what is helpful to understand is that a very small percentage of our cases actually go to trial. The numbers estimate between 3 and 6%. So the system is successful at resolving most cases prior to that stage, and most cases don't have the layers of complexity and difficulty that yours do. That being said, when a client came to see me when I was acting in private practice and they said, how much is this going to cost? How's it going to go? I always said, there's 4 pieces to that equation. This is 4, I can count, back when the other side was usually represented. And I said, I can tell you that I'm not going to be the problem. I'm going to work to solve your problem as efficiently and effectively as I can. But right now, I don't know about the other 3 factors. You seem lovely to me, because usually they were, but I don't know how you're going to behave as this rolls out. I don't know how your spouse or your ex-spouse is going to behave, and I don't know how their lawyer is going to behave. Now, the family bar is fairly small. We do know many of, if I knew Brian or Julia were on the other side, I would have said to you, it's no problem. Like, they will not be the problem. We will move this forward.
You have my name, you will be.
Well, the name name speaks for, we spend a lot of time developing our credibility and our reputations, and most of us won't throw that away for a particular client. But a difficult client or a less collaborative, I say little c, collaborative lawyer can make the process more complicated. So I don't have an easy answer for you. We are making progress. This year, the family rules were amended to beef up the costs orders. Costs are one tool that judges have available to them to punish bad behavior. You have to collect it, but if there's funds, that's a tool that's available. The direction wasn't changed, but we beefed up the importance of proportionality and those kind of important themes about how a family court case should ideally run.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I am not here speaking for my case.
Right.
It is just obvious, as I knew other self-represented litigants and frankly even represented ones, that there is this lack of accountability. There is not even a category for abuse of the spouse during during separation. That in fact it has been removed from my research, and shame on us. And I am soon to be a senior, maybe aged an extra 10 years, the last 7. So even abuse of seniors, we have places to call for that. So shall I wait another 3 years and then I can call them? I'm trying to say that there are issues with the court process, both from a bias of good people, and I facilitated an event. I facilitated an event of the book called Bias of Good People. I get that. We're all human beings. However, there is a however, and the however is when it's clear and evidence with third parties, clearly, now I'm into fraud investigators and forensic accountants of over $500,000 that continues for 7 years not to be disclosed in the financial statement. And not one lawyer, not one judge said, gee, we need full disclosure.
Okay, thank you. Financial disclosure is another area that we are aware of and we continue to make progress on, but again, your case does sound quite complex, and it's hard to cover everything off by way of rule amendments, but we're working on it. I know we're not fixing everything overnight. The purpose of today is to show you some of the innovations that are moving forward. I just want to answer really quickly a few of the questions that have come in online. Someone asked about newer calls, attending training sessions, and commented on the cost. We're very aware of that. We are trying to make the training sessions for the roster free. We have Law Foundation funding. The one on December 5th is free, and I encourage you to go. Vanessa, there was a question?
Can it be on webinar after, like if you can't attend the day?
Yes.
So her question is, will it be on webinar after?
Yeah, it will be available later through the OBA on webinar. We because the training is a requirement, we have to figure out how to verify that you've taken it in order to meet the requirements of the roster. But we're working through those kind of details.
Because the idea was to scale this to the greatest possible extent to meet the very highly scaled need that
Yes.
there is. That's why.
Once we start planning travel and going to other locations, we may need to start charge some fee to offset that cost, but our goal is to make it as affordable as possible for any lawyer who wants to participate. How do lawyers become involved? Come to the training session on December 5th, and it will be abundantly clear. And can the various websites discussed during the panel be provided? Yes, I can actually send links around, I assume through Chloe, so we can put that together for sure.
And I have for ours, I have a few.
And Julie has
I
some
have a few
handouts
bookmarks.
for the Clio
For
stuff.
the Clio stuff.
Okay, I'm a family law clerk and have been for the last 12 years. How does one get involved in supporting the initiative and closing the gap? That's great. Family law clerks, Brian and Julia will tell you, are hugely valuable additions to the family law team. They help us keep costs more affordable. They do help with a lot of the day-to-day work. I don't know that there are law clerk specific initiatives, but certainly that's something that people can think of as we move forward. So any more questions? I'm just mindful of our timing. We have around 10 minutes left. So are there any more questions in the room? Sure. Can you grab the mic? Yeah.
Hi, my question is the model that you guys are putting forward for the limited scope retainer, are those solicitors going to be able to assist litigants with trial as well as appeals to superior courts?
Sure. There's
100%, no restriction.
Yeah.
No restriction.
Now, lawyers will have to offer to do that. But one thing, for instance, Brian talked about coaching. Coaching prior to trial is one way of helping as well. You can, so that's the menu. Will you coach for the events or will you attend the events? There is one group of non-family lawyers, they're civil litigators who do exclusively trial work for unbundling. I'm looking at Sheena to know. I've met the man before, but yes, is the answer.
And does that cover as well as child protection under the family law?
So that's a good question. So the roster is specific to what we call domestic family law.
Yes, okay.
We haven't done child protection. Not that there isn't a need, but that's an even more specialized bar. And legal aid is more available in child protection than it is in domestic. It's not that to say that we couldn't, but we wanted to start. I mean, there's huge need, just for family law. Child protection is a little harder, and we are facing greater challenges in child protection, having enough lawyers to do the work, even on a full certificate basis. So not yet is the answer.
And just going back to your other one, so trial preparation would be, it's ripe for this type of work because there's so many different pieces, from the evidence to the legal argument to how best to examine witnesses, et cetera, for, especially, for example, a coaching scenario where, it could add incredible value could be added at that point.
I mean, it doesn't mean you couldn't call the lawyers on the roster and ask them if they do child protection work, but that hasn't been our focus to date. Okay. Any more questions in the room? We had more questions to pose for the panelists, but I think instead I'm just going to open it up for any closing comments for any of you. Oh, sure, sorry.
One more there.
Thank you for your presentation. It's great what you're doing. Is there any thought of expanding from family law to, say, small claims court, the issue of forms, the issue of unbundled services, representation?
So I'm pretty open about this. All I care about is family law. It's what I do. It's what I eat, sleep, and breathe, other than some personal interests. Depending on the day. The need is so great for unbundled and other things. Clio's Steps to Justice does cover, is it 12 areas, 10 areas? 9 areas. So remember, this is all being done on a volunteer basis, and we have 3-year project funding for it. So the answer is no, that's not it's out of scope of our project, but the Law Society, I think it's fair to say, is considering these issues. And in fact, their directory, their lawyer's directory, now actually has a place to check for unbundled. So like Joel said, it doesn't give you the full menu, but I think that's something that another group is going to have to tackle. Not that it's not important, but the people around this table are family law people and all kind of doing it on the side. So I don't know how much capacity we have to go beyond.
And
Yeah.
if she could clone herself, she'd care about that as much as well, I can assure you, because she's that person. But, you know, if you talk to people who want to do it, it does take, frankly, thousands already of volunteer hours of people, I would say thousands for sure.
And a real commitment from the bar.
And a real commitment from the bar. So if you could, but if you could look at it as a template and then move that over to what you're talking about, why not? There's no reason why it wouldn't.
Yeah, and actually, so we have the retainer agreement is the basis of the contract between the lawyer and the client, and we've worked with Law Pro and to do a really detailed retainer agreement that I think fairly easily could be amended for other areas.
Yeah.
So I think, as Brian said, we've done a lot of the groundwork, but we'd need other people to run with that.
Because that's one of the key things for the lawyer side buy-in, and Law Pro and the law side have been very, very helpful to us, very helpful, which is really critical.
And you have volunteers to help with no charge for people that have technology background and
Very good.
Thank you.
Just have one more question. Are the solicitors going to be in a position, like, for myself, I have a certificate through legal aid, and it's a contribution agreement, and I myself, I've been in this case for about 2 years now. I found I've made most progress representing myself. So I am looking for more of a limited scope retainer. But of course, I am on government assistance, so I can't afford that at cost of my own, and I have LAO. Would that be something that your group would acknowledge and be able to work with? Would you be able to work with LAO and say, well, maybe there's a certificate that's for full representation, but you know, would then the only do like a limited scope retainer?
So one thing that was really important to us is to not be seen as removing legal aid's obligation to fund family law services, because many of us would like to see legal aid doing it and doing it more. Their cutoffs have recently increased, but the levels are still very, very low. And so we're not trying to remove the burden, their obligation at all. And in fact, that's kind of key to lawyer buy-in, because lawyers are doing some of this work at reduced rates. It's not quite as profitable, and there's some challenges there. We certainly could have something on the roster about, do you accept legal aid certificates? But I'm not sure that the lawyers would accept the legal aid, because legal aid is fairly poorly paid to lawyers too. I'm not sure they would do unbundled and on a legal aid retainer basis, and I don't even know if legal aid would allow that if they figured it out. So we could reach out to them. They're on our advisory board, and we've spoken to them mostly about a specific private duty counsel project that we're operating now in Barrie. But it's a good thing to think about. I don't think we've thought about it before.
No, and it's actually a complicated question you asked,
Yeah.
as it turns out.
Because you have to talk to LAO, and then there's the contribution piece. There's two different sort of certificates, one where they kind of cover it, and another where
Right.
the litigant would pay a portion. And so
And what we don't want them to do is start saying, oh, you can afford, you want to do unbundled, you do it privately, therefore we're not funding you. Like, we're not trying to relieve them at all of what we think they should be doing. Julia, you wanted to?
Oh, I just wanted to mention, because you brought up the issue of Law Pro and how, when you first started, there was this whole yellow tape, do not enter with regards to unbundled services. And today they tweeted out, what steps you can take to ensure that your unbundled process. Yeah.
In the last 5
Yeah.
years. And actually, Ian Hull at Law Pro and Andrew Feldstein 2 weeks ago did a webinar about unbundled, and so the language has changed. But lawyers tend to be risk-averse people, right? Like, we don't really want to be sued, and you don't want to have to handle that complaints or lawsuits. So, we're moving forward. We're just trying to give everyone a little bit of a.
And it's a culture change. It's that culture change. And I actually think, though, because so many people are involved in this and the public wants it so much, that I think that it's going to be a tsunami and we're going to see a real sea change. I'm mixing a lot of metaphors, but I can see all water metaphors, but I can really see that happening.
Great. Well, I'm going to wrap up and thank our esteemed and diverse group of panelists. I think they brought a lot of information. And I want to thank everyone for coming and for listening
Thank
to
you.
my shtick. We really want to help inform the dialogue on access to justice so that you see what we're doing, because sometimes we do this behind the scenes, and we'll keep moving forward. Thanks, everyone.